There is a man standing outside Buckingham Palace right now. You have seen him, maybe not him exactly, but one like him, scarlet tunic, a tall black cap that swallows the top half of his face, white gloves, a rifle held against his shoulder steady as a fence post, and around him all day long the noise of the world, cameras, children, people leaning in close to see if he will blink, buses sighing past on the road behind, and through all of it he does not move. We love him for that stillness. We travel a long way to stand in front of it. But there is something we almost never ask, standing there in our shorts and our sun hats, lifting our phones. What does it cost him to stand like that? Because here is the thing most people don't know. That uniform was not built for a warming world. And in the summer of 2025, it brought the country to a strange and telling moment. One where the most powerful traditions in Britain quietly bent, not because anyone was weak, but because someone in charge finally said the thing out loud. Enough. Bring them in. This is the story of the day the king stood his own guards down. And to understand why that mattered, you have to understand what those men and women carry every single day without a word of complaint. So let me take you there. Picture the forecourt of Buckingham Palace on an ordinary summer morning. The gravel is pale and bright. The black railings throw long, thin shadows. Tourists are already gathering, pressing up against the gates, 3 and 4 deep in places, the way they always do. Some of them have been there since before breakfast to get a spot at the front. They have come for the spectacle, the changing of the guard. It is one of the great free shows of the world, and it has been performed in one form or another for a very long time. The king's guards were formed in 1660 to protect the royal family and the palaces after the restoration of the monarchy when Charles II became king. That is more than 3.5 centuries of men standing where this man is standing now. Think about that for a moment. Before electricity, before the cars, before the country had even dreamed of half the things we take for granted, there has been a guard on that ground. About London Laura. The soldiers you are watching are not actors. This is a point worth sitting with, because the costumes can fool you. The guards have 2 roles in the British Army. First and foremost, they are highly trained infantry soldiers who carry out operational duties worldwide. And in addition to that combat role, they train for the public duties where they take part in state and royal ceremonial events. The same soldier who is standing so patiently while a stranger waves a hand in front of his eyes has very likely served, or will serve, in places far harder than a London forecourt. The stillness is not softness. It is discipline. There is a difference, and it is the whole difference. Changing the guard. Now look up at his cap. That tall black tower of fur has a name people get wrong all the time. A common mistake is the name given to the foot guards' famous tall fur hats. They wear a bearskin, not to be confused with the smaller busby worn by the Royal Horse Artillery on ceremonial duties. And the bearskin is not a hat in the way you and I think of a hat. It is a serious piece of kit, with serious weight and serious history. The standard bearskin of the British foot guards is about 18 inches tall, roughly 45 centimeters, weighs around 1.5 pounds, and is made from the fur of the Canadian black bear. The Crown chronicles the Crown Chronicles. 18 inches. Stand a ruler up on your own head and add a few more inches on top of that and you start to get a sense of the thing. Now imagine it sitting there for an hour, 2 hours, in full sun. And the fur was chosen for a reason that tells you everything about the climate this uniform was designed for. The bear fur is used for its warmth, its water-resistant nature, and its ability to hold its shape. Warmth. Read that again. The signature piece of the King's Guard uniform was selected in part because it keeps the wearer warm. That made perfect sense in a Britain of cold, gray mornings and damp marches. It makes a great deal less sense on a July afternoon when the mercury is climbing toward numbers this island was never supposed to see. The Crown Chronicles. Because the cap is only the beginning. Below it comes the famous scarlet. The king's guards are known for their distinctive uniforms, which include scarlet tunics, bearskin caps, and white gloves. And those tunics are not light summer cotton. They are heavy, close-fitting wool, buttoned to the throat, built to look immaculate and to last built again for a colder country than the one we now live in. About London Laura. So here is the full picture of the man on the gravel. A tall fur cap chosen for warmth, a thick wool tunic done up to the neck, white gloves, standing on stone and gravel that throws the heat straight back up at him. No shade, no water in his hand, no moving around to keep the blood flowing, just stillness by command for as long as the posting lasts. On a mild day, that is hard. On a hot day, it becomes something else entirely. And this is where the story turns, because Britain's summers are not what they were. Something has shifted, and the people who study weather for a living do not soften it. Since 2020, temperatures in the UK have regularly reached alarming levels. The numbers that used to belong to other countries have started arriving here. 40 degrees Celsius, that is 104 degrees Fahrenheit, is now within the realm of possibility, as the country witnessed in July 2022, and the forecasters do not expect it to stop there. According to the UK's Met Office, the National Weather Service, it is entirely plausible that by 2050 temperatures could peak at around 45 degrees Celsius, roughly 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Futura Sciences +2. Now hold those two facts side by side. A uniform built for warmth and damp. A country starting to bake. You do not need a science degree to feel where that leads. It leads to men falling down. I want to be careful and honest here, because this is the part people share and exaggerate and turn into something cruel, and it deserves better than that. These are not isolated freak events. There is a pattern, and it is on the record. Several soldiers fainted during Queen Elizabeth II's state funeral in September 2022. Think about what that means. On one of the most solemn, most watched days in the nation's recent history, a day when every single person on duty would have given anything to hold the line, the heat and the strain still took several of them down. Not because they failed, because the human body has limits, and those men pushed right up against them in service of the moment. GB News. The pattern continued. During the first heat wave of 2024, a cavalry guard dramatically fell to the floor during rehearsals in London as temperatures hit 27 degrees Celsius, and the guard was taking part in a private rehearsal ahead of the king's official birthday. 27 degrees. That is not even a headline temperature. That is a pleasant day for the rest of us, a day for the park and an ice cream. And it was enough in that uniform standing that still to put a trained soldier on the ground. GB News. It was not only the soldiers either. The record shows just how widely the strain spread on the hardest days. A police officer fainted while on duty and was carried away on a stretcher shortly before a procession walked down the mall, while a soldier also collapsed, and at least 2 other military members required assistance. And the near misses were caught too, the moments that almost became falls. In March, a member of the Irish Guards appeared to almost faint in a social media clip, swaying backwards and forwards in full ceremonial uniform before being caught by another guard. GB News. GB News. Caught by another guard. I keep coming back to that small detail because it tells you something the uniform hides. Underneath the stillness, they are watching each other. They are ready. When one of them starts to go, another is already moving. That is not in any tourist brochure. That is just what these people are. So now we arrive at the summer of 2025, and the moment that gave this whole story its shape. The warnings came first. This was not a surprise that landed out of a clear sky. The country's weather service did something it has almost never done. The Met Office activated only its second-ever red weather warning for extreme heat, with temperatures across parts of England and Wales forecast to approach 40 degrees Celsius. AOL. Stop on that phrase. Only its second ever. The red warning is the top of the scale, the level reserved for heat that is not merely uncomfortable but genuinely dangerous to human life. in the entire history of that warning system. The country had reached it only once before, and here it was again. The alert took effect midweek, prompting authorities to recommend that people limit travel and outdoor activities. AOL. Limit outdoor activities. That was the official advice to the entire nation. Stay in, keep out of the sun, do not push it. And meanwhile, by long tradition, there were men due to stand on a stone forecourt in fur and wool in full sun, without moving, for the entertainment and the heritage of the country. You can see the collision coming, can't you? Tradition on one side, human safety on the other, and tradition in Britain does not bend easily. That is rather the point of it. It is supposed to be the thing that does not change, the fixed star you can navigate by. The Guard has stood through wars and grief and centuries of ordinary weather. Standing it down is not a small administrative tweak. It is the institution admitting that something is bigger than the routine. And that is exactly what happened. King Charles ordered the suspension of the iconic changing of the Guard ceremonies at Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and other royal sites as Britain braced for potentially dangerous heat. AOL. The king stood down his own guard. I want to let that sit because it is the heart of everything, and it is so easily misread. It would be easy, lazy, really, to spin this as weakness, as the great British tradition buckling, as the famous unbreakable line finally breaking. That reading would be wrong, and I think it would be a small and ungenerous way to see a fundamentally decent act. Because look at what the decision actually said. The cancellations affected the popular tourist spectacle that sees soldiers in their distinctive bearskin hats and red tunics swap duties at multiple locations. And the body responsible for organizing it all did not hide the reasoning behind procedure or pride. The Household Division, responsible for organizing the ceremonial events, cited the welfare of personnel and animals as paramount. AOLAO. The welfare of personnel as paramount. Paramount. Above the show, above the tourists who had traveled across the world, above the centuries of unbroken routine. The people came first. We will pick the story up right there in the next part. In the words the Household Division actually used. In the careful way they protected not just the soldiers but the horses. And in why this rare decision tells you more about real strength than any unbroken parade ever could. But before we move on, hold one picture in your mind. The man on the gravel, the cap built for warmth, the wool done up to his throat, the sun coming down on a country that was never built for it, and somewhere above all of it, a decision being made that, for once, his standing there was not worth what it might cost him. That decision did not weaken the tradition. It might be the most human thing the tradition has done in a very long time. We left off at the decision itself. The king stood down his guard, and the reason given was simple and human. The welfare of the people came first. But a decision like that is never one line on a page. It is 100 small choices, made carefully, by people who clearly thought hard about how to do the right thing without throwing away the dignity of the thing they were protecting. And when you read the words they actually used, something comes through that you do not expect from an army announcement. You can hear them choosing their words with care. Here is what the Household Division actually said, not a paraphrase from a tabloid, their own statement on their own official site. They said they take the well-being of their soldiers and military working horses very seriously, and like the rest of the country, were aware of the forecasted excessive temperatures expected that week, including a red alert towards the middle of the week. Household Division. Read that opening again like the rest of the country. That is a small phrase, and it is doing a lot of quiet work. It refuses to set the guard above ordinary people. It does not say we are tougher than this. It says, in effect, we are part of this nation, and this weather is dangerous for all of us, soldiers included. There is a humility in that which is easy to miss. And they did not stop at their own people. They pointed out that the Met Office and other government agencies had issued detailed advice recommending a reduction in travel and outdoor activity, and said that to support that effort, and to reduce the risks to military personnel and horses, as well as, importantly, to the public who usually gather in large numbers to watch. That week would see some changes. Household division. Importantly to the public, they named the tourists. The very people who might have grumbled about a canceled show were, in the division's own reasoning, part of the reason for canceling it. Because think about who comes to watch. Families with small children on their shoulders. Older visitors who have saved up for years for this one trip. People standing shoulder to shoulder, pressed against railings, for an hour or more in the full sun with nowhere to sit and no shade to step into. A red heat warning does not care whether you are a soldier or a grandmother from halfway around the world. The crowd was at risk too, and somebody in that building was thinking about them. So the order came down plainly. There would be no ceremonial guard changes in Windsor and London on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. 4 days. 4 days of one of the most famous rituals in the world simply set aside. Household division. But here is the part I find genuinely moving, and it is the part that separates a thoughtful decision from a blunt one. They did not just cancel everything and walk away, because the guard is not only a show. Underneath the spectacle there is a real job being done, a real handover of real responsibility. According to the household division, the event represents the formal handover of responsibilities between the old guard and the new guard, and typically lasts around 45 minutes. The duty itself cannot simply stop. The palace still needs its guard. The posts still need to be held. Reality T. So they kept the substance and shed the ceremony. And the way they handled the horses tells you everything about the level of care involved. The King's Life Guard, the mounted troops at Horse Guards, would change without ceremony at 8 in the morning on the Wednesday and Friday to avoid heat stress to the horses. 8 in the morning, before the heat of the day had built. Without the ceremony, without the crowd, without the long stand in the sun. The job got done. The animals were protected. The pomp was quietly dropped. Household division. Why move so carefully for the horses? Because anyone who has ever been around them knows how much these animals give and how little they can say about it. The household division noted that the King's Life Guard would still change shifts without ceremony specifically to avoid heat stress to the horses. A horse cannot tell you it is overheating. A horse will stand where it is told to stand, faithful and uncomplaining, right up until it is in real trouble. The people responsible for them knew that, and they planned around it. Reality T. And for the soldiers who did still have to stand a post, there were measures too, small, sensible, humane adjustments that you would never notice unless someone told you to look. While soldiers were on guard, the public might notice that they had been moved to shaded positions and were being changed more frequently. Moved into the shade. Swapped out sooner, so no one man baked in one spot for too long. It was noted that this is standard practice during hot weather. Household division. The Royal Observer. Standard practice. I love that detail because it punctures a myth. There is a popular image of the King's Guard as some kind of unfeeling statue, a man who would stand until he dropped because the rules demand it. And while their discipline is absolutely real, the institution around them is not stupid and it is not cruel. It has rules for the heat. It has always had rules for the heat. The shade, the rotation, the early changeover, none of that was invented in a panic. It is built in. The care is part of the tradition, not a break from it. That reframes the whole thing, doesn't it? We tend to think the tradition is the standing still, but maybe the tradition is also the watching, the protecting, the knowing when to bend. Maybe a system that has lasted 3.5 centuries has lasted precisely because it learned long ago that you protect your people or you lose them. Now you might be wondering, is this normal? Does the guard get canceled every time it gets a bit warm? And the honest answer matters because it is what gives this moment its weight. No, it is rare, genuinely rare. Although cancellations are rare, they are not unprecedented, and the company this one keeps tells you how serious the bar is. The ceremony was suspended following the 2017 Manchester Arena bombing, and it was also halted for nearly 18 months during the COVID-19 pandemic. Reality T. Sit with that list for a second. A terrorist attack that killed children at a concert. A global pandemic that shut down the entire world for the better part of 2 years. These are the kinds of events that stop the changing of the guard. National tragedy, once-in-a-century disease. And now extreme heat. That is the company this 2025 decision keeps. The weather had become serious enough to belong on a list with a bombing and a pandemic. When you put it like that, the cancellation stops looking like an overreaction and starts looking like exactly what it was. A recognition that the climate had crossed a line into genuine danger. The changing of the guard was also called off after the 2017 Manchester Arena bombing at the Ariana Grande concert, so police and soldiers could be deployed elsewhere. In that case, the soldiers were needed elsewhere for the safety of the public. In 2025, the principle was the same even though the threat was different. The safety of people came before the performance. The Royal Observer. The scale of the 2025 response across the whole country drives the point home. This was not some isolated fuss about a tourist attraction. The same heat that emptied the palace forecourt was emptying classrooms. The heat wave forced the closure of hundreds of schools across the south of the UK, roughly 100 schools in Somerset, a similar number in Buckinghamshire, and more than 80 schools suspending classes in Gloucestershire. Those counties sat within the area covered by the red weather warning, along with London, where nearly 10 major schools also cancelled in-person lessons. BRNAMA. Children kept home from school. Travel advice issued nationwide. And on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, the soldiers brought into the shade. It was all one decision, really, repeated 1,000 times across the country by 1,000 different people in charge of other people's safety. The guard was simply the most visible version of it, the one with the cameras pointed at it. Let me bring it back to the man on the gravel one more time, because all of this, the official statement, the horses, the precedent, the shade, it all comes down to him and to what he represents. The household division did not say it in so many words, but the whole shape of their decision said it for them. They were never going to leave a soldier standing in dangerous heat purely so a crowd could take a photograph. They cited the welfare of personnel and animals as paramount. And when officials weighed everything in the balance, the conclusion was the same one any decent person would reach. Officials said that protecting people and animals remained the priority, even if it meant disappointing visitors hopping to witness a piece of royal history. AOL Reality T. Disappointing visitors. That was the cost, and they paid it without hesitation. Some people, no doubt, were let down. Someone somewhere had built a whole day around watching that ceremony and went home without seeing it. That is a real small sadness, and I do not want to wave it away. But set it next to the alternative, a soldier carried off a forecourt on a stretcher in front of those same families, in front of those same children, and there is no contest at all. The institution chose the soldier over the spectacle. It chose the horse over the photograph. It chose, quietly and without drama, the living people over the performance of tradition. And it turns out that is its own kind of tradition, older and deeper than any parade. In the final part, I want to step back and ask the bigger question this whole episode leaves hanging, because the heat is not going away. The uniform was built for a country that is disappearing, and that leaves the King's Guard and everyone who loves them facing a question that has no easy answer. What do you change, and what do you protect when the world itself starts to shift beneath 3.5 centuries of standing still? So the heat passed, as heat does. The crowds came back. The ceremony returned to the forecourt, the bearskins back in the sun, the scarlet back against the railings, and the world went on taking its photographs. But the question that summer raised did not pass with the weather, because here is the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath this whole story, the one nobody especially wants to say out loud. The uniform was built for a country that is slowly disappearing. We have already talked about the fur, chosen for warmth. We have talked about the heavy wool, buttoned to the throat. We have talked about a Britain that is creeping toward temperatures it was never meant to feel. Put all of that together and you arrive at a genuine problem, one with no easy villain and no simple fix. The most recognizable uniform in the world is, in some real sense, out of step with the climate it now has to stand in. And that brings us to the cap itself. Because the bearskin is at the center of a long, hard argument that has been running for years, and it touches on far more than just the weather. Let me lay it out plainly and fairly, because there are decent people on both sides of this, and it does no one any good to pretend otherwise. First, the cap is not cheap, and it is getting less cheap fast. The bearskins worn by the King's Guards now cost more than £2,000 each, and according to figures seen by the animal rights group PETA, the price rose by over 30% in a single year to £2,040 per cap. And the spending is not small or occasional. PETA says each cap uses the skin of one bear, that the Ministry of Defense bought 526 bearskin hats between 2017 and July 2024, and that more than £1 million of taxpayer money has gone on the caps over 9 years. ITV News. More recently, the numbers jumped sharply. Freedom of Information figures showed orders rising from 22 caps in 2024 to 96 in 2025, with the Ministry of Defense spending in excess of £225,000 on the latest batch, and the price per cap climbing again. GB News. Then there is the part that is genuinely hard to hear, and I am going to report it carefully because it is a claim made by campaigners rather than a settled fact. According to PETA, the pelts are sourced from Canada, where bears are hunted using high-powered crossbows, a practice that the group notes would be illegal on British soil. The organization claims many animals are struck more than once, with some wounded bears escaping only to die later, and alleges that hunters bait them with buckets of sweet food before shooting. Whether every detail of that is accurate is contested, but the broad picture, that a real bear dies for each cap, is not seriously in dispute. GB News. And the public, when asked, leans heavily one way. A Times pollster found that 75% of Britons considered the caps a bad use of government funds, and YouGov polling showed that 78% of people with an opinion supported switching to faux fur. So the campaigners have a strong case, and they are not standing on the fringe of opinion. Most of the country, when it stops to think about it, would rather see this changed. Vegan FTA. So why on earth has it not been? This is where you have to be fair to the other side, because the answer is more honest and more complicated than the campaigners' version sometimes allows. The Ministry of Defense does not actually defend the bear hunting as a good thing. Its position is narrower than that and worth quoting closely. In response to a petition that gathered over 100,000 signatures and was debated in Parliament, the Modi said that no bears are hunted to order for the Ministry of Defense, and that the pelts are a product of legal and licensed hunting, authorized in Canada by provincial and territorial governments with the goal of long-term population sustainability. In other words, the bears are being culled anyway under a Canadian program. We are buying a byproduct, not commissioning a slaughter. Campaigners dispute that framing hard, but that is the official line. ITV News. And on the faux fur question, the Modi's answer is not a flat refusal. It is a list of standards that, so far, nothing synthetic has managed to meet. And Modi's spokesperson told the BBC that they are open to exploring faux fur alternatives if they pass the necessary requirements. The trouble is what those requirements actually demand. Any alternative fabric would need to be as absorbent and as quick to dry as real fur, to look as good, to hold its shape over time, and to be comfortable and safe to wear. And the ministry says it has so far not found a suitable alternative. Forces News AOL. A faux furrier did offer a free supply, and that offer is real. The luxury faux fur company Equipol offered to provide a 10-year supply of faux bear fur free of charge, which PETA says outperforms animal fur in laboratory testing. But when the synthetic was independently tested, the results were mixed in a way that matters for a cap that has to stand in all weather. According to the parliamentary response, while the Ecopol fabric met the basic standard for water absorption, it showed unacceptable rates of water shedding and performed poorly on the visual assessment, so it did not meet the standard required for a cap worn throughout the year and in all weathers. Vegan FTA petitions. And here is a detail that complicates the easy story even further, because it shows the Modi is not simply clinging to fur for tradition's sake. The Modi does already use man-made alternatives in its uniforms where they provide a suitable, affordable, and sustainable replacement. For example, the smaller Busby hats worn by the king's troop are made from faux fur. They have switched where the synthetic worked. They just say it does not yet work for this particular cap. As of that statement, the government said it had still not seen evidence that a suitable faux fur product exists as an alternative to bearskins, and that it had no plans to end their use. Petitions. So there it sits, a cap that most of the country would change, a government that says it would change it if only the replacement could do the job, and a synthetic that keeps coming close and not quite arriving. Reasonable people genuinely stuck. Now, why have I taken you all the way through a debate about hats, in a story that began with a man standing in the heat? Because it is all the same story, can't you feel it? The bearskin is the perfect symbol of the bind the whole tradition is in. It is beautiful. It is iconic. A guardsman standing to attention on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace is as much an icon of British culture as the red telephone box or a cup of tea. It carries real history. The caps date back to after the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, originally established to make soldiers appear taller and more intimidating. And it is at the same time expensive, ethically fraught, and built of a material chosen for a colder, wetter, simpler world than the one we now live in. Forces News ITV News. The fur keeps the wearer warm on a planet that is getting hotter. The wool buttons to the throat in summers that now carry red warnings. The whole magnificent costume is a message from the past, and the past did not know what was coming. And yet, there is something in us that does not want to lose it. Even those who would happily swap the bear for the synthetic do not mostly want to lose the sight of it, the scarlet, the stillness, the tall black cap, the whole impossible discipline of a person standing like that for us in our honor in all weathers. The guardsmen themselves feel it most of all. Guardsmen take great pride in wearing the bearskin cap, which is an iconic image of Britain. It is not vanity, it is belonging. It is the feeling of standing inside something far older than yourself and carrying it, for a while, on your own two shoulders. Petitions. So let me bring it back one final time to him, the man on the gravel. Everything we have talked about lands on him. The warming country, the heavy uniform, the expensive, contested cap on his head, the cameras, the crowd, the centuries pressing down from behind. He carries all of it, and he does not move, and he does not complain, and most of the people photographing him will never once wonder what it costs. And in the summer of 2025, for 4 quiet days, the institution above him looked at all of that and made a choice. It chose him. It cited the welfare of personnel and animals as paramount. It brought him into the shade. It changed him out more often. It moved the horses to the cool of the early morning. It let the great show go dark for a little while, and it accepted the disappointment of the crowd as the price of keeping its people safe. AOL. People will tell you that was the tradition weakening. I think they have it exactly backwards. I think that was the tradition remembering what it was always for. Not the spectacle, not the photograph. The people. The living men and women and animals who give us that beautiful stillness, day after day, and ask for almost nothing in return. A statue stands in the heat until it cracks. A nation worth the name brings its soldiers in. So the next time you see him, scarlet, silent, that tall black cap catching the light, don't just take the picture. Stand there a moment longer than everyone else. Think about what he is carrying in every sense. And know that on at least one blazing week, in front of the whole world, someone looked at that man and decided he mattered more than the show. That is the kind of strength that doesn't need to stand in the sun to prove itself. That is a guard truly standing firm.